Has crime ceased to be a negative for voters in major American cities? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Everyone notices it now. Crime in many American cities is crippling. Yet majorities of registered voters in those same cities continue to vote for officials who will only make it worse. We saw that most recently in Chicago, Illinois. After Lori Lightfoot lost her primary, voters elected a worse mayor, possibly the worst mayor they have elected so far. Understand, the voters deserve more criticism than does the new mayor who proposes to govern a major city without police. That can have only one explanation. The voters do not care about crime, or rather, crime is the new method of redistribution of wealth and revenge against their putative oppressors. This could set up a Donnybrook that will make the St. Valentine's Day Massacre look like a neighborhood boys' tussle in which no adult need have meddled. A provocative statement? Yes. And a provoked statement, too. Before I explain, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads, "Thanks for the free trial of communism, but I'd like to cancel." And this is a free trial of communism. For one thing, crime in the Soviet Union was as crippling as it now is in Chicago, maybe more so. Lieutenant Viktor Ivanovich Belenko, late of the Soviet Army Air Forces, actually said, "Let someone rob their women of their clothes and underwear at knife point in broad daylight just so that they can sell those clothes and underwear, and then Americans will begin to understand crime." Unquote, Viktor I. Belenko. It's not as bad as that yet, but it's getting there. And more than that, allowing crime to continue has a communist motive, as I intend to show. One more thing, if you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, look for that new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it. It's called the Super Thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, as long as it's legal tender. First, a briefing on what is happening in Chicago. The site Liberty Airwaves quotes a February 23rd article by WTVO-TV, Channel 17, ABC, Rockford, Illinois. They in turn quote a report from an outfit called Wire Points, naming Chicago the murder capital of the United States in terms of absolute number of murders committed. I quote, "Chicago's 697 criminal homicides in 2022 were the most in the nation for the 11th straight year. Philadelphia suffered the second most with 516, New York City 438, Houston 435, and Los Angeles 382 rounded out the top 5. By contrast, cities with the fewest homicides out of the 75 survey were Plano, Texas, and Gilbert, Arizona. They suffered 1 and 3 murders, respectively." Close quote. Not 100. 1. Continuing the quote. New Orleans' 2022 homicide rate of 74.3 homicides per 100,000 residents. It's the nation's highest in the country of 75 cities surveyed. Rounding off the top 5 were St. Louis, 68.2, Baltimore, 58.1, Detroit, 48.9, and Memphis, 45.9. By comparison, the nationwide homicide rate was 6.5 per 100,000 in 2020, the most recent reliable national rate. Wire Points said the safest cities and towns are west of the Mississippi. Houston stands out as the exception. But Houston has leftist politics almost as bad as that of Chicago. But more than that, the safe places are away from the coast. What's so special about areas in the western interior? Lack of gun control, that's what. When people can defend themselves, crime takes a dip. More guns, less crime, as John R. Lott Jr. repeats to anyone who will listen. So what did Chicago voters do? As mentioned, they ousted Lori Lightfoot, who turns out simply to have run out of friends with her abrasive manner. They then elected Brandon Johnson, who thinks as Lori Lightfoot thinks, and worse. Police are the enemy to him, and he wants them gone. In fact, Johnson actually wants to send therapists and social workers as emergency first responders. He also believes there's nothing wrong with the city's budget that a big tax increase won't fix. Dick Morris yesterday said that anti-crime candidates were losing elections for mayor, prosecuting attorney, and so forth. He highlighted or lowlighted Chicago as a booby prize example. Nor is Chicago the only example. Consider New York, where Alvin Bragg, the unworthy successor to Robert Morgenthau as New York County District Attorney, also lets violent and property crime rise. One outraged mother chastised him publicly after he declined to prosecute the alleged murderer of her son. This is, of course, the same Alvin Bragg who weaponized his office against the biggest national anti-crime candidate, Donald Trump. That case will merely go down in history as a political blunder. His softness on crime in his city is much, much worse. But again, as bad as his policies are, that outraged mother's fellow voters voted him in. Now, why would they do a thing like that? I'm going to give you one likely answer, and you're not going to like to hear it. But first, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is rsilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit rsilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, that question, why would voters do that? Well, all right. So why would voters vote against a candidate promising to crack down on crime? I'll tell you. To inner city voters, crime is something that happens to someone else. Worse, crime is something that those to whom it happens deserve to have happen to them. Why? Because the targets of crime, or so someone has led these voters to believe, have more than they. And they, the voters, risk being victims not of crime, but of, well, take your pick, mistaken identity, excessive use of force, whatever. The point is, crime isn't something that happens to them because they're not likely to have anything or any amount of money worth stealing. Which brings me to my next point. A thief is an irregular wealth redistribution agent. Examine closely the broader platform of any pro-crime office holder, to paraphrase Morris. You will find redistribution of wealth in one form or another at the heart of their political program. So why prosecute an activity, i.e. crime, that accomplishes the long-term goal? That applies particularly to theft, both petty and grand. It applies especially to the smash and grab shoplifting that is driving major retailers out of American cities. San Francisco, recall, lost its flagship Whole Foods market. Likewise, Chicago is losing 4 of its Walmart outlets. Between shoplifting and the loss of honest business, the stores are losing money. Simple as. Activists demanded that those stores stay open anyway, but they have no regard for the dangers of running a store in the neighborhoods involved. They act as if Walmart owes them something for the dubious privilege of doing any business whatsoever in the city in which they live. But worse, over the weekend, Chicago descended into anarchy. Large crowds, mostly of teenagers, are running riot in the streets. I have links in the description to 3 tweets containing embedded video of those riots. Watch them and weep. And Mayor-elect Johnson refuses to condemn the teenagers. Now, he's not brazen enough yet to condone such violence, but he excuses it by saying that the teenagers are starved of opportunity. But don't voters understand that law and order are prerequisite for such opportunity? Well, after all, they elected this avowed follower of Karl Marx. Now, one can almost understand, though one must loathe the spectacle of widespread theft. After all, one can actually subsist for a while on selling stolen goods or spending stolen money. And frankly, any one of those voters from where I sit might have taken part in one of those smash and grab shoplift waves. But now, let's talk about another crime that is out of control in Chicago and New York and so on, and that is murder. Now, how does murder avail anyone? We're not talking here about one middle or upper class person murdering another to secure an inheritance, ensure silence, or for any of the favorite motives that shows like Perry Mason or Columbo used to highlight in the last century. Sometimes we're talking about robbery leading to murder. Dead men tell no tales. If he just turned over his cash, oh, I'm sure you've heard it a few times yourself. If you're a police officer, you definitely have heard it. But most of the time, we see murder from sheer spite. I don't like you. Bang! You're dead. Or maybe not necessarily bang. Time was when society took murder more seriously than any other crime. The maximum crime rated the maximum penalty. So the rot set in when states began abolishing that maximum penalty. What we see now is worse. Prosecutors won't prosecute crime, not even murder. This goes beyond, a would-be dictator is a menace to us all, and a $130,000 hush money payment is as good as a thing as any to send him up the river for. We see the excusing of murder for the sake of excusing it. No doubt a certain bald-headed engineer of German extraction regards a murderer as an irregular population thinner. That doesn't explain voters who elect a pro-crime prosecuting attorney. Whoever votes for such a person likely regards murder as justifiable revenge, or maybe the understandable consequence of sticking your nose into someone else's quarrel or other business. And now comes the $1,024,000 question. Where will these crime waves lead? Dick Morris seems to believe that one day, even the progressive left will realize that so much crime makes a world unsafe even for them. True enough, a certain kind of crime enjoyed a toleration that ultimately led to a bloody excess that in turn led to a crackdown, and that excess happened in Chicago. In 1929, 2 gangs of bootleggers divided Chicago between them. Everyone should remember the names: Scarface Al Capone and George Clarence Bugs Moran. Tensions grew between them until at last each leader conceived the notion that the other wanted to kill him. This set off several rounds of assassinations, but the people of Chicago didn't care, as long as they could visit the speakeasies where prohibited liquor flowed. A few deaths here and there didn't matter to them. But on February 14th, 1929, gunfire broke out inside the SMC Cartage Company Company garage at 2122 North Clark Street in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood. According to one popularized version, one young woman entered the garage, somebody had left the door unlocked, saw 7 bloody bodies thrown together, and ran screaming from the building. Cue Lionel Newman's excellent 20s gangster ragtime music that introduced a movie called The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, directed by Roger Corman with Jason Robards, Ralph Meeker, and George Siegel, released in 1967 by 20th Century Fox. I have a link in the description to a short video playing the main titles. Now, I can't vouch for the historical accuracy of the story about some young woman walking into that garage, finding those bodies, and running out screaming. But she was the perfect metaphor for the absolute outrage, the shock, the overwhelming feeling among the American public that if such a bloody spectacle could take place that close to where decent people live and work, then it can happen directly to those decent people, and somebody had to do something. Al Capone won a battle that day, but that was the beginning of a war that he went on to lose. Now, if you listen to Dick Morris, you think that maybe we're headed for that. You know what I think? I say no. It won't be so simple. You see, we've hit the tipping point at which people of good heart flee the cities. This applies equally to residents and business operators. Anarchy will become the rule, and rival militias might form among those who still remain for whatever reason. But even if another St. Valentine's Day massacre occurs, nobody will care. People like the young woman who might or might not have run screaming from the SMC Cartage Company garage on Clark Street won't even still be living there. Instead, they'll have moved out to the sticks, the boondocks, whatever you wish to call the rural areas. They will have formed that parallel economy that will render the present cities unnecessary. No, the crunch will come when those cities collapse totally, and those who brought the collapse about range out from them looking for prey. And then will come the Donnybrook. Then and only then will the cycle stop. Links in the description of the article to those 3 tweets with the embedded video showing the Chicago riots of 2023, to the main titles of that movie I mentioned, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to rsilverknives.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to my earlier video about what San Francisco has become, about Lori Lightfoot losing her primary, and that video with that movie main title. This is Terry A. Horwood delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.